Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. Thank you for staying tuned. Now we get into our next conversation, and our topic of discussion today is on effective government communication. How do we ensure that there is transparency and proper responsiveness? And joining me on this particular conversation is Patricia Ndede. She is the Vice President, Public Relations Society of Kenya, and she is also the CEO, Communications. Madam Patricia, welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing this morning?
Thank you.
Yeah. If we may just get straight into what exactly is the Public Relations Society of Kenya and what is its role?
The Public Relations Society of Kenya is a professional body for public relations and communications practitioners who come together to advance excellence in the practice. So we have a membership of 15,000, and we have been in existence for the past 52 years. And just like our colleagues in the HR profession, in the legal profession, where they have their own professional bodies like LSK, IHRM, we are also a body within the profession of PR and communications, just to ensure that everything within the practice has excellence and everything is within the assigned parameters and rules of any practice such as this. Yeah.
I get that. Now, when we are talking about government communication, what exactly are we looking at?
Government communications is quite wide. And each regime, of course, has its own structures of government communications. But in a nutshell, government communications actually speaks to the audience, which is the public, members of the public, and government. So with that relaying of messages and ideals and public policies that are fashioned by the government entities, and not forgetting providing feedback, because if there's no feedback, then it's not a complete communication cycle. So for us right now in the current government, I think there are structures that have been put in place and that are very evident, that you could actually say are bringing up to speed the whole practice of communication. You see, the other day we now have a new government spokesperson. Each government ministry, state department has communication officers who are professional, who have studied communications, who are in the practice, and so they understand the science behind development of communication strategies, implementation, and just overseeing that, making sure that all the strategies and all the policies that have been put in place in paper are now executed. Yeah.
So who are responsible to ensure that there is effective communication when it comes to government?
I think I could say that falls in different layers and different pillars, because when you look at government communication as a broad spectrum, you have communication emanating from the presidency up, and then flowing down to the ministries and state departments, and then you also have the parastatals also. So in each set, I could say we have communication strategies that are functioned, and these communication strategies should basically have a few things that speak to the whole issue of communication. And this could be, for example, when you're having a communication strategy for a government entity, there are certain elements that are very important for them to look at. So you have a strategic plan. Right now, we are now looking at performance contracting that everyone is subjected to. You're now looking at work plans, and you're looking at the manifesto of the government of the day. So whatever communication strategy that any government entity has, be it a state department, be it a ministry, be it a parastatal, they have to focus on these elements that I have mentioned, so that they're not working in isolation, from what the government has prescribed.
Okay.
So the communication strategy has to speak to the work plans, has to speak to the communication strategy, has to speak to the manifesto, so that, and also the strategic, and also the performance contracting. Because when you're going in there as the PS or the CS to now say, this is my scorecard, this is what we have done within this period of time, the deliverables that are being reported, or rather the scorecard, need to have been spoken to with the communication strategy, so that as the communication strategy is being executed, it is answering to those things that we said we were going to do within the performance contracting, within the work plan, within the strategic plan, if it's a 5-year one, if it's a 3-year one. All these things have to result into deliverables that then say, as a government entity, this is what we have been able to do. We said we were going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 things. We have done them. We have surpassed them by this much, and therefore we can say our performance is excellent and our performance is this. And if it is not, then you give reasons why that was not executed. Probably it was because of financials, or something that was very inevitable. But ideally, these documents should speak to each other in coming up with the communication strategy for any government entity. Yeah.
And what parameters form the basis of the government's scorecard?
Now, those are very, if I could say, now those are very deep within what the present day government would subscribe or would say. And I don't think I'm in a position to speak for, say, the government spokesman now, or what he wants to bring forth as the new spokesperson. I'm sure, you know, he's just gotten into office, and when he does, he will now let us know what he wants to unearth, what he would like to see, and how he would like to work things differently for the betterment of the whole communication, government communication strategy. Yeah.
All right, I get you on that. And when we're talking about communication, it can be a one-way. It's not a one-way street.
It's definitely not a one-way.
Yes. So maybe how do we ensure, or do we have enough feedback mechanisms in our government institutions whereby, you know, they get the feedback of the people? Do we have enough feedback mechanisms?
Now, in government communication, in the past few years, government communication has grown. And government communication has also grown as a result of having the presence of public participation and being very deliberate about public service delivery. Now, public service delivery is not done in isolation, just being done and then you keep quiet. Of course, it's like cooking. When you cook, you serve the food to people to eat. You don't cook and then keep it in the kitchen. So for public service, for example, you realize we have had, for example, the transparency and we've had like the Huduma centers, for example, the 52 Huduma centers that actually is a one-stop shop for all government services. But when you look at those services being offered, they're not being offered in silence. They're being offered, and for the government agencies who are present there, they say, for feedback, please get back to us on this. This is a toll number, this is a call center, this is how you can get back to us. And with this age of advanced communications in the digital era, you realize that even social media is working around the clock. It's 24/7 thing. So you have government officers, communication officers, who are actually given that role to respond to those, to make sure that the feedback mechanism is all round, and also the customer satisfaction levels are at optimal levels, and therefore the public, or rather the citizen, is able to feel that my needs are taken care of. And even if not to satisfaction, but at least there's some form of feedback. There's someone telling me, no, this is what you need to do, this is what you need else to add on, and so on and so forth. So With that also in our constitution, when you look at certain articles in the constitution, say Article 10(2), which talks about public participation. Public participation is a must. You have to go to the public, put in your agenda, get feedback, and then come back and then implement what you'd like to implement, of course with feedback, and then also letting people know what you intend to do. So public participation is becoming more and more visible. You can now see more parastatals, doing calls for public participation before they start on anything, before they even start on a survey that is being done. So I think the only thing that needs to be done now is to streamline that, to streamline that whole public participation process, so that it is not all over the place, but it is very guided and very scientific, knowing that this is how it starts and this is what follows, and even the financing of it. So much as it is being embraced as prescribed by the prerogative of the Constitution, our Constitution, it needs now to be streamlined, so that people are able to know these are the parameters of public participation, this is what is needed, and therefore once you're done, you look at it and say, from our results in the public participation, what are we seeing? And what can we do away with? And what can we do with these results? So that kind of ambiguity needs not be there, but it needs to be streamlined. But it's a good start either way. It's a good start just to have public participation going on within different agencies in government. We're getting to see more and more of that.
Yeah, and maybe still on public participation, I had a question on accessibility. Is information easily accessible to the members of the public?
Information is becoming more easily accessible. I can say as a government, we are not where we used to be, say, 10 years ago. Even within the government communication structures, you realize that each agency, each ministry, each parastatal or whatever it is that is in government now have what I call the blueprint, the communication strategy. And they say this is what is prescribed. This is what, if you come to us, and that is entailed in the service charter. If you come to us, we will get back to you in so long. If you have a complaint, we will look at your complaint and get back to you in a record X number of days. If you're not satisfied, then again you realize that most of them, based on the issues, they have tribunals. So it could be a tribunal that now looks at aggrieved parties and cases that could not otherwise be resolved within the agencies. So that is again another form of communication, and looking at it, more and more of these government agencies are now embracing this. We could have call centers now. We have social media entities that respond. So government has really grown. I could say government has grown, and the new look and face of government has made it look, has made it more transparent. And we're in an era where if you're not happy with the service, then you say it and it's picked up. So most agencies are able to work around that, and most agencies have actually been able to have that transparency and have its own strategy that speaks to the needs of the audiences of the public.
Still, when we're talking about the public, something else concerning the public has to be public trust. How do they ensure that they build public trust?
I could say trust with anybody, not just in government. Even for you and me, trust is something that is built over time. And it's based on the bedrock of believability. So trust is built up on what you as an entity or what you as a person say you're going to do. And have you done it? Do you have that track record? So the trust within different agencies, I could say, is on different levels. I couldn't all lump it up in one. But different agencies have built their trust over time. And this is by actioning and saying that we are going to do this, and they actually do it. And also going over and above the expected what is expected of you to do. And I'll give a very good example of, say, immigration and maybe the Huduma centers, for instance. Before, you could go round and round and round looking for a certain document, from lands, and then you come back and go and look for something from, registration of persons, and then it would be so tiresome. It would take days. In between, there are people asking you for kitu kidogo, So that erodes trust. But, government services and public service delivery has changed over time. And now that you have all those under one roof, and there's that script where, so this is expected of the government entity within a certain time. And it dictates that excellence is no option. I mean, that is what has to be. So you realize that it's a breath of fresh air, and trust has been built over time because of that. So you walk in there and you have so many services. Something that would take you so many days is taking you a shorter time.
Yeah.
And what does that then do to the economy? It makes business easier to do, because then your paperwork is then processed faster, and it's even straightforward, and you have very limited, if at all, you have very limited brokers coming in between and telling you this is what you need to do, so give me this amount of money. So that has completely been cut off. So that then you see that process builds trust. So it is upon each and every government entity and agency within their communication also to showcase and say, this is what we are for, this is what we are doing, and this is the results that have been. Have testimonials. You can see more and more government agencies having testimonials within their customer satisfaction levels, where they're talking about customers or members of the public who have come out to seek for a service and have come out happy, or the time taken, the turnaround time is even shorter. So with that, trust is built. And that's why I was saying trust is not a one-day thing. It's something that is built over time, but you have to have a deliberate move to make sure that I want to build this trust between myself and you. And therefore, it's upon me to make sure that I do this right, I have transparency, and also I make it worth your while. So that you're able to understand and be happy as a client, as a customer, because as a member of the public, you are the customer of the government.
Yeah, for sure. You've just mentioned something to do with transparency.
Yes.
When we're talking about transparency, is it what you've just talked about, or what are we looking at when it comes to transparency?
Transparency is very...
in government entities.
Depending on what agency it is. Right now we're talking about even data protection. And how transparent is transparent? That is a question. So transparency for me, as we talk about this, is as far as a service is concerned, and how you're able to communicate how you give your service. So if you're able to communicate and say, when you come to this government office, you're able to look at 1, 2, 3 things. This is what you're going to get from us. That is spelled out in the service charter, basically. So that kind of transparency is what we're talking about, and what you expect as a member of the public when you're interacting with the government.
Okay. How does effective communication generally affect the overall governance of a government?
Like, if you have communication structure that is not transparent, if you're not able to spell out what you stand for, if you're not able to give your services in totality, in full, if you have hidden costs that you're not explaining to the public or to your customer, if you're taking more time than is stipulated in your service charter, if you're not taking up a case, for example, if it's a complaint, be it in the NSSF, be it in the NHIF, or whatever government it is, or whatever government agency it is, of course, then that soils the governance, because governance is basically about doing the right thing as you rule, as you make sure that everything is followed to the letter. So if these things are not done properly, you then allow for gray areas and question marks, which then taints your image. And of course, at the end of the day, governance is questionable at that point. Yeah.
All right. Now, as we continue with this conversation and as we get to wind up on it, we cannot fail to mention the visit of King Charles. Right. He's starting his 4-day visit tomorrow in the country. And maybe what should the government do to ensure that there's proper communication during this visit, you know, just to ensure there's clear messaging out there on his visit?
Well, this is a visit that is, for the king, this reminds him a lot. I could say this reminds him a lot. It's actually the first visit to an African country ever since his coronation last year, and also the first to member of the Commonwealth. So we are at a very privileged pedestal as a country, I could say. And of course, this is where his mother was when she was pronounced queen. And so it holds a lot of memories for him, I should think. To your point, what needs to be done is a lot in terms of communication, because communication doesn't stop or does not begin because we have a special guest. It should just be on point and heightened if need be. And in terms of messaging, I think the government communication structures and the machinery should be out there explaining and simplifying the visit of the king. Maybe what narratives do you feel should be more emphasized? Going by what is even in the media currently, you will not ignore the fact that we have certain things that are a thorn in the flesh, if I could say that. And people are wondering, what is he going to speak about? Is he going to speak to these issues? For example, the apologies, the historical injustices, for instance. So it is a wait and see, but also it is within our role as the government communication machinery to ensure that meaningful and mutual diplomatic ties are upheld, and they can only be upheld through two things: what happens on the ground within the two countries, the UK and Kenya, and then of course the narrative whose responsibility is the media and the government communication structures. So what we say, how we say it, and how we make the members of the public view it is what is going to be taken in. So the responsibility lies with us as a government communication machinery, to actually ensure that this is seamless and that it is truthful, and that those things expected that will be spoken about, for example, the injustices, are actually spoken about, and if not, possibly explain why they've not been spoken about and what is being done about them. Again, we go back to the issue of trust and transparency. So we hold that mantle, and we owe it to the public to be responsible communicators and to be responsible people who are carrying out these messages, so that it is able to build and not destroy.
All right. I will allow you to give us your parting shots as we finish.
Well, I've said so much about government communication, but on the PRSK side, on the Public Relations Society of Kenya, which brings together so many 15,000 practitioners from government, from academia, and from the private sector, from advertising agencies, is just to look forward to, this visit, be responsible people, as we are the ones handling this, and also the summit. We have a summit that is coming up, the PRSK summit in Kwale County. This is an annual summit we have. It's the biggest event of the Public Relations Society of Kenya, bringing together practitioners. And this year it's going to be in Diani, Kwale County, from the 27th November to 2nd December. And we are looking forward to having conversations in there on artificial intelligence, on government communication, on women leadership in communication, We are also now breaking ground as a country within the profession, going to the East African community. We had our East African Public Relations Week, the first of its kind last year. This year, it's being hosted by Uganda. And then immediately after, we're having the summit. So some of the discussions will be how to break ground and how to just spread our wings and have these meaningful conversations within the region. And we are actually looking at this summit as the biggest communication conference. So we have moved, and I'm very glad to say that we have moved from the national level. We have broken ground on the regional level, and now we are going international, even from our speakers and those who are going to participate. So we are looking forward to, even having our government spokesperson there, talking a lot about government communication and also just about general communication and how to handle things within the digital age and other issues as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, and
Thank
thank you so much for shedding light on this particular conversation. Now, don't you go too far, because Mike Megwe will be back to continue with Good Morning Kenya.